I'd like to thank Rich and Sue Sugden, also Foster and Lynn Fries and their children and their foundation for bringing me here today to be with all of you. As Rich said, I, as a child, lived in Iran for several years. In high school, I lived in Germany, and I would hitchhike through the Middle East, and also took a year off between high school and college and spent that time in countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran. And at that time, in the early 70s, I met hundreds and thousands of Muslims, and very, very few exhibited any animus, any hatred whatsoever to non-Muslims. I was aware that across the Persian Gulf, there were Muslims who evidenced that kind of hatred. I'm referring to Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. But prior to the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the export of Wahhabism to South Asia, there was not the radical Islam in that part of the world that you see in the film that we just witnessed. I can tell you that what you see in this film is very real, and there is an extremist virus spreading in Muslim communities everywhere in the world, which stems from an ideology, but an ideology which really has become a major business. Saudi Arabia spent over $80 billion by their own records and statements. They've spent over $80 billion since 1979 exporting an extremist understanding of Islam, which promotes the kind of hatred and violence that you just saw now in the film Obsession. I established LibForAll Foundation in December of 2003 with a gentleman named Kiai Haji Abdurrahman Wahid. He was for many years, 15 years, the head of the world's largest Muslim organization, the Nahdlatul Ulama, which has 40 million members. He's the former president of Indonesia, in fact, the first democratically elected president of Indonesia. The Wall Street Journal has referred to President Wahid as the single most influential religious leader in the Muslim world and easily the most important ally that the West has in the struggle with radical Islam. I met President Wahid almost 10 years ago. I used to be in the telecom industry, breaking down incumbent monopolies around the world. And we sold part of our telecom company to the national carrier of Indonesia. And my wife and I relocated to Indonesia in 1999. I learned the language. I felt drawn to study the process of the Islamization of Java in the 16th century, which may sound like a very esoteric field of study. But after 9/11, I realized why I'd been drawn to engage in that study, which, by the way, had led me to meet a number of Muslim leaders, such as President Wahid. What occurred in the 16th century in Java was that Islam was arrived, and it was utilized as a very political, radical understanding of Islam was utilized by primarily ethnic Chinese and Arab immigrants who used the ideology of jihad to seize military, economic, and political power and sought to annihilate indigenous Javanese culture. And the Javanese mobilized to oppose radical Islam, and they succeeded in doing so. But the process through which they were able to defeat this radical Islam in Indonesia in the 16th century was first by mobilizing the people through counter-ideology. That is, they used music, they used stories, they influenced the psychology of the masses to discredit and ostracize the notion that was being propagated by the radical Muslims, and then mobilize the population to defeat them. And interestingly enough, President Wahid is a lineal descendant not only of the last Hindu-Buddhist kings of Java, but also of the Muslim mystic and saint, a man named Sunan Kalijogo, whose disciples defeated the radical Muslims. And this became the inspiration for our establishing LibForAll Foundation. In October of 2002, a car bomb and a backpack went off in a street in Kuta, Bali. And with a single car bomb and a backpack, the immediate casualties were about 202 people in a couple nightclubs. But the fallout of that event was that 80% of the population of Bali depends on tourism for their livelihood. And huge numbers of these people were driven out of work. They had to return to rice fields. They had to go out in small wooden boats, not much bigger than this podium, and pull their food out of the ocean in order to make a living. Radical Muslims are seeking to place explosive charges at all the key junction points of the world economy. Their target is not just America or the West or Jews or Israel. They threaten all of humanity. And the strategy that LibForAll Foundation has developed to defeat radical Islam is based on the strategy that was employed in 16th century Java. And what we basically do is we build networks of very powerful Muslim leaders in 6 areas. The first area is religious leaders, that is top ulama who have national and international reputations. These are religious scholars. Heads of mass organizations, Quranic experts who again have an international reputation. So these are religious leaders. The second category are top educators, rectors of leading Islamic universities, people who are involved in developing national religious curriculum. The third category is pop stars. I'll show you a video in just a moment, and you'll see several of these elements coming together. The fourth category is people in government, and then business, and the mass media. Before I go on with my remarks, I just would like to show you a 60-second video that will give you a different flavor and maybe a feeling of hope after what we just saw. It's a video of a gentleman named Ahmad Dani, who is the Muslim equivalent of Bono in Southeast Asia. Danny's best-selling album sold 10 million copies. 10 million copies. And you will see him here performing, and then you will also see him with President Wahid at the end. When you see Danny kissing a gentleman's hand, that is President Wahid. So if we could just get that video for a moment, please.
Freedom is precious and must be defended. The struggle against
In the very brief time that I have to share with you here today, I might just give you an example of 3 separate projects that LibForAll has undertaken and then give you an idea of where we're going. The gentleman you just saw, Ahmad Dani, and the song that he was performing there was a #1 hit in Indonesia. It was actually from an album called Laskar Cinta, The Warriors of Love, which was deliberately created to discredit a group called Laskar Jihad, the Warriors of Jihad, who slaughtered approximately 10,000 Christians in the eastern provinces of Indonesia from 1999 to 2002. Danny is on LibForAll's board of directors. This project, this album, Laskar Cinta, was a LibForAll project. When the album was launched in downtown Jakarta at 4 in the afternoon of a Thursday afternoon in November of 2004, there were approximately 200 people who attended the launch at a nightclub. Every single person who attended was a card-carrying member of the press. And the reason they attended was not because he called his album The Warriors of Love, or because he was seeking to discredit the Warriors of Jihad, but rather if Bono had a press conference anywhere in the world, there would be hundreds of launching a new album, likewise hundreds of people attending. Danny was asked by the equivalent of the New York Times in Indonesia, what's the difference between the Warriors of Jihad and the Warriors of Love, between Laskar Jihad and Laskar Cinta? And he answered, the former spread hatred for their fellow human beings, while the latter spread love for all humanity. And any Indonesian who thinks with a healthy heart and mind will agree that what I say is true. That was in the newspaper the next day. It was on television all over Indonesia and radio. And as you can imagine, Danny was viciously attacked in the ensuing months by radical Muslims. It took them approximately 3 months to launch a counterattack against him. This album, by the way, became the top album in Indonesia. 2 songs became the #1 hits in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim population in the world. Those same 2 songs became the #1 hits on MTV Asia. When Danny was attacked, he had to move his wife and children into a 5-star hotel for their protection. And I called him from the United States. And I said, I hope that people are coming forward to defend you. And he said, my phone is burning up with people expressing sympathy, but everyone's afraid to speak out. So I said, I'll get on a plane, I'll come over there.